I'll zoom in because it's. So I guess the key change that we've made since we last met with the panel and we lodged the RFI back to council was to increase the size of this car park at the front of the school. So it's been increased to 30 spaces. We've also closed, so there was proposed to be 2 driveways from Maitland Street. So we're closing this northern driveway and just changing it to a single driveway here at the south. So the big impact of that is that it means that we can increase queuing length. So cars can turn left in off Maitland, come through and then queue around with a formalised kiss and drop area up on this part of the site. So I think it's now like 225 metres worth of queuing space. And then turn out and left turn. So it's still left in only and left out only. So that's necessitated removing a few additional trees here at the front, but we think the traffic benefits warrant that. There's also been just some minor changes in terms of responding to some comments from council around stormwater management. So a new bioretention basin is being positioned over here to respond to council's comments. There's been some minor changes to Maitland Street. The bus stop's been shifted slightly closer up towards the Thompson Street signalised intersection. And also, now that we've got this single driveway from Maitland Street, that means that we've got an opportunity to sort of provide a left-in lane. So that sort of also increases queuing length as well. I think that's the main changes to design. There's been no real change to the building. It's slightly shifted up north just to provide for make sure that the width here allows for a vehicle to pass while another vehicle is parked. Oh, and the other thing that I think was mentioned last time by the panel was impact from golf balls from the golf course. So there's now proposing to have a 6 metre long safety fence through this section of the boundary to the golf course.
Just so you know, most people don't hook the ball, but we wanted to do that anyway. Anyway, I won't go into that.
Yes, so I think they're the main key amendments that we've made to the design of the development. And then in conjunction to that, we've made some updates to the flood emergency response plan, and particularly so council's Muscle Creek flood warning system. Sorry. So I thought Darren could talk to that.
Sure, thanks. Yes, those principal changes from the documentation is largely around incorporating that Muscle Creek flood warning system into the flood emergency response plan and looking at the opportunity for flood warning and evacuation triggers arising from that. We also provided some additional detail in that flood warning and evacuation timeline for a couple of different events also, so for events up to the 1 in 2,000 year type return period, and then more specifically for the PMF as well. So sort of identifying, I guess, additional evacuation windows that we do have for the site, recognising as well that the principal flood response still is about having the available warning times in place to enable school closure. So the evacuation timelines that are presented in the report really is a worst case condition if it basically is a sunny day and these thousands of year return period rainfalls appear without no warning, which is an unlikely event. But notwithstanding, even if that very unlikely situation was to occur, the warning system and available timelines for response and evacuation enables the school to have an appropriate response to get people to the flood evacuation points in enough time.
Yeah, so what's on the screen is the absolute worst scenario, which we had. It's actually because now the Muscle Creek flood warning system has been incorporated along with, you know, all the other mechanisms. That's for the worst case scenario, has increased this time frame. Sorry, Alison, did I interrupt you?
Yeah, no, that's all right, because the flooding's one aspect that we probably want to drill down on, and just understand. And you know, basically that this is one of the major issues with this application. You're putting a new school in a flood-prone area, and we're just wanting to understand that in a lot of detail. Council's taken us through the flood scenarios for the site. So were there other things that you wanted to talk to present to us before we actually start asking some questions?
You're here for Richard, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say good morning, everyone. As we saw recently with the events in southeast Queensland, and as Darren and our peer review flooding consultants have been talking with us about during the design and writing of the flood reports and the peer review of that, one of our strategies is that in the event of prolonged rain, we would actually be notifying parents that the school would be closed and students wouldn't be attending school at those times. And I think that's the reason for raising the weather event of last week up in southeast Queensland, is that that's what we actually saw happen at the schools up there, where the Department of Education and other bodies in Queensland asked people not to attend school at those times. And so I think that sort of validates our management plans and what we've got in place for severe weather events. So I just wanted to raise that. I think that worked very well up there in Queensland. And yeah, Chris, you've got a number of schools that were sort of subject to that, and it sort of worked well from a management perspective. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, in our case, we had 5 schools closed for a number of days. But obviously what we're looking at is, you know, the theoretical worst possible case that no one's ever seen, like a biblical flood, basically, with a PMF. I'm just a lay person, so I have to defer to the flood engineers, but I find it, you know, none of us have seen, you referred to it, Alison, as a flood prone area, but there's only a small portion of the site on the western tip that does reasonably regularly have some water on it. So I don't feel it's a flood prone area per se. And we have this clear plan here to move the students off. So yeah.
Yeah, I think we're all of the view that, like, the model's the model, but we're seeing more because of climate change. We're just going to see more weird scenarios happen, and that's what part of the flood inquiry, if you like, basically was saying to us, and that we've got to actually plan for those events. So we are very interested in those triggers. As I said, a lot of this is talking about evacuation, and I think from my perspective, you know, the worst case is we're not dealing with an existing situation. We're dealing with a decision to hit a school on land that has a constraint on it, that you have to put in place certain management approaches and design approaches. So the whole idea of children being taken to an evacuation centre and their parents not being there is very uncomfortable. So that is
mình cho là rác hỏa
probably want to drill down on, which is
mà tịnh độ được cái đó là ma độ nó dẫn hiện gì Đức Phật nói khi mà các Phật nói khi mà các con thấy người ta hiện ra.
Yeah, look, thanks, Alison, and thanks very much for your presentation today so far. I think reinforcing what Alison's saying, this issue of climate change is making these theoretical scenarios more real. I'm living the north coast of New South Wales, or lower section of it, but we experienced the school closures here with the threat of Cyclone Alfred, and the kids just enjoyed a couple of sunny days off around here. Early days, and then there was a bit of rain, but we didn't have an emergency. But it was good that number one, these threats are real, and number two, people are taking the threats seriously and doing that closure. So I can understand how your strategy is intended to respond to that. I do have some questions. So the buses and the evacuation are sort of a last desperate measure to make sure nobody drowns, basically, putting it bluntly, I suppose, which is critical, and there's a big focus in your flood evacuation management plan. I just wonder, is the school seriously going to buy 3 buses to sit there and wait for a PMF? Is that the fact, or what are you going to do exactly? Are you going to hire them or have them on standby?
Yes,
or,
I've taken advice from. Sorry, I'm happy to respond to that. I've taken advice from the flood engineer that we will need to have buses on site to evacuate the whole of the school, the full student population. So yes, I'm expecting that the council will condition that and we'll purchase buses.
And are they going to have another purpose as well? That's about.
Yes, we will use the buses. Yes,
that's about $300,000 worth of buses sitting there, so you'll have them for excursions and so forth, I assume.
Yes, we'll use them for multiple purposes.
Okay, I feel much better about that than having them sit there doing nothing for a very long period of time. Okay, that was just that question. I just wanted to know that they actually have a real purpose as well as the theoretical purpose of the extreme flood event. Thank you. Yeah, that's all for now. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks. Granville?
We've been looking very carefully at evacuation, obviously, post a situation where children have been dropped off at school and the weather turns bad during the day. Could you actually walk us through how you would use various warnings prior to morning school and what you would look at particularly to avoid the situation of having children at school during a period that worsens and does cause flooding? I think that's what we really need to look at closely.
Yeah. And just adding to that, I'm just looking for the black and white. When are you actually shutting the school? Because as you said, you're just picking up on Granville's point. I'm very uncomfortable with children getting added, taken to a evacuation centre and their parents not being able to get there.
So Alison, if I could, if I may.
Yes. So it's the black and white.
I mean, the truth is, I personally cannot see us ever getting to a situation where we have this event where we're moving children off in buses. Quite honestly, that's there as, to me, that's a compliance matter. We're never going to see it. The school will be closed by Janet so early that it'll never be a situation where we're moving kids off on buses. I can tell you that. We're doing this extra for compliance because we want to educate the students. The school will be shut if there's well in advance of any deluge. So that. I'm not a flood expert, but I can tell you that, and that's what we've done recently with the cyclone. I mean, in that case, obviously we had a lot of warning, and the cyclone was sitting out at sea, and everyone was waiting and waiting. But we will respond very early. The safety of the students is on Janet and myself to some extent, but on our principals. They take safety of the students as the absolute paramount in all areas of the school, and that we will close the school well in advance of any desperate flood evacuation.
Yeah, so from our point of view, just where I'm unpacking that, and Richard and Darren, maybe if you want to just talk to that, I'm just looking for those triggers that are just saying the schools, these are the triggers for the school to be shut because of what Chris says. We don't really want to be in a scenario where we've actually got to get the kids on the buses. So we're going to be buying buses. They're going to be there. It's my worst case scenario. But the reality is that we will be conservative in our approach, and these are the triggers for the shutting of the school. So what, can you just maybe step us through those?
Yeah, correct. No problem. This is a good opportunity. So we probably haven't fleshed that out or provided that in enough clarity.
As engineers, you're dealing with the worst case.
Yes.
And when I'm seeing the worst case and saying, yeah, right, this is a new, we actually don't want to get there. So what have we done not to get there? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I might, I'll talk to that initially, and I might throw up a slide as well that has some specific reference. We're referencing the cyclone at the moment, but the Dungog event, for example, is another really good real life scenario.
One that we remember. Yeah.
100% how it played out with these warnings. And so what affects flooding at the site predominantly is, for the really large events, is going to be East Coast low pressure systems, which was what was Dungog 2015, and which essentially is like the cyclone category. So the low pressure systems sitting off the coast. So we often have, so the initial trigger for the school will be if there's an East Coast low warning, and that would look very similar to what the tropical cyclone Alfred warnings were. And these come days in advance, typically, because they're major weather systems that the Bureau are tracking well in advance. So the initial trigger is even having an East Coast low system, a warning in place, that could be the initial trigger. And as I said, that could be days before landfall or before the system actually moves across our catchment. Within the bomb warning, official sort of bomb warning products, there's a few other sort of steps post that as well. The next one is more flood watch and severe weather warnings, which are in place prior to major rainfall events, and recognising that we don't have site flood affectation until we have, 1 in 200, 500 year type rainfall. So they're major rainfall events that we know that are going to be on the bomb radar systems quite early. So initial trigger in East Coast low, days in advance. Flood watches and severe weather warnings are typically at least 24 hours in advance of these major rainfall systems. And I'll show you the Dungog timeline in a moment as well. So that's at least 24 hours before the rainfall event, typically for rainfall events of this magnitude, what we're talking about. So that's the second trigger opportunity for the school to close if they don't, in fact, shut it down during an East Coast low warning. The third trigger then that we do have in place is the warning system, the Muscle Creek flood warning system, and you'll note in the reporting that generally gives, for say, for the events up to the 1 in 2,000, 5,000 year type return period, so really extreme events, we have hours of flood warning by the time the triggers so we have the SMS alerts coming through by that warning system, which will be automated responses getting pressed out to the mobile phones, in which the school will subscribe to them services also. So that's probably the third trigger point, and actually reflects.
So Darren, just picking up on that, and this is where we really want to understand and kind of the black and white. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because we're just kind of absorbing information, is the Muscle Creek warning system, and given that this is particular to Muscle, gives you something like 6 hours, but the Bell Street road will probably be cut in about 30 minutes after that. So again, that scenario, what my question is the Muscle Creek warning system too late? Because while I've got plenty of time to get kids off site, I can either walk them or bus them. Because of the nature of Muswellbrook and the fact that it gets cut in half, am I going to be left with the scenario that some parents are not going to be able to get their kids. And I'm just going on the Muscle Creek warning system.
Oh, absolutely. If it's a situation where we haven't already closed and evacuated the site, and this is happening real time, there is a possibility that you won't be able to access. That's the whole idea of evacuating children to the evacuation centre.
Yeah, so this is where in a new, like I get for existing schools. So this is from a panel perspective. Yep. We're weighing up on, you don't want to kind of keep creating poor situations. So again, looking at when you say there's an East Coast low, and we've all experienced the weather, that might be too early for closing the school. The flood alert and watch definitely sounds to me like a black and white, we're shut. But I'm just trying to understand what are the triggers so you do not get, the Muscle Creek one, and I'm, Richard, yep. Please pipe in and has said, I'm just reacting to what I'm hearing.
Yep. So the flood watch will be that first on 24 hours.
Only because I might get, because of the nature of Muscle Book, yep. And the fact that, you don't want to have kids left without parents and an evacuation centre.
So,
yeah. And so
could
I
just ask Darren a question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Darren, so in that scenario, when we're talking about the East Coast low coming, the quantum of rain we receive, knowing that there's an East Coast low coming, we would be able to shut the school before that flood warning system goes, the alert that Alison refers to goes off, wouldn't we? Like the order of severity is East Coast low is identified first, and therefore that would be the school's first point of call to say we're not doing school. And then it's only in a very specific, like, I don't even understand the circumstance, but for that alarm to go off, you basically be sending staff home is what I understand from our management plans, not kids because they're already not at school.
Yeah, and like I said, that reinforcing that second trigger after the East Coast low warning is the flood watch and severe weather warning issued by the BOM, and typically that will be somewhere like 24 hours in advance of these sort of rainfall systems. So I live in Newcastle, so in 2007 and 2015 they were the exact. We had warnings in place that recommending don't travel to work, no transport, don't travel if you don't need to travel, all these sort of things. All these warnings are in place. And that's typically, and as I said, that's how the Dungog event played out. I can drill into that in a second. So
I'm just, Darren, I'm just trying to.
That would be the black and white.
No, nail it down, because I'm also conscious of, there might be, you get this weather warning, East Coast low, and then if something doesn't eventuate. So I'm just trying to figure out that the amount of information that the school's going to have and just say, rightio, at this point, it's been raining yesterday, we've got the don't travel to work, don't do unnecessary travel. Is that the trigger that they shut the school? Or correct. Is it the flood, and where am I again, where am I on the continuum? That's before the flood watch 24-hour, which definitely is a shut the school. And that means the kids are, I've either got time for them just to go home normally, or you're just not turning up, you're just not turning up.
Can we also make the point that it's not just this school that would be in that situation? So as we saw in Southeast Queensland, if this situation occurs, the public school is going to shut, any other school is going to shut in its general vicinity. So
you got to be careful. We're dealing with the new school here. So this is I don't want to sugarcoat this. This is a hard decision for the panel because a lot of the other schools, they're existing. They have to put things in place. All of those, they're already there. And we've been dealing with alterations and additions to existing schools. This one's a hard decision because it's a new school that is actually having to look at this and put structures in place. And again, you know, just generally, we're supposed to be avoiding building stuff in, you know, areas that are creating scenarios like this. Just so I'm not giving weight to existing schools because our decision is about a new school. So that's
Yeah,
why
I understand your point.
yeah, that's why you're hearing us is that, you know, we're not comfortable, but we're actually pulling it apart and drilling down so we understand, you know, the level of risk, the appropriateness and that type of thing. And I take your point, Chris, that, you know, we're planning for the worst, but sometimes we see the worst. So I'm just trying to say that what are your flood people saying to you so that you are not put in that scenario, for example. So that's why we're trying to understand these actual triggers. Building buildings is easier for us. We understand there'll be criteria that you'll have to, survive high hazard flood and that type of thing, and you'll design for, in the worst case, it'll get wet. And you've got a whole insurance regime, but as I said, ours is about, you know, one other part of it is this kind of safety aspect and what we're doing in potentially allowing the school on the site.
Yeah.
So, Darren, you perhaps were going to talk about Dungog, which is, you know, for those of us who are in the area, and as I said, we're locals. Some of us are, you know, we're familiar with Dungog. So do you want to just say how that played out, which was, remind me, was that the one in 500 event?
Yes, that's
so we know what that looks like.
100%. And yeah, so I'll just share the screen here and hopefully that pops up. Can everyone read the slide? I guess slideshow. I think I only need to show the current slide. How's that? That's still there?
Yeah, 4 days warning, East Coast low. Yeah.
So as I said, East Coast lows. There was a warning in place for at least 4 days prior to the event. Then the next trigger we had a flood watch and severe weather warning issued, and that was 24 hours. You can see the timeline here, just to reinforce. I don't know if you can see my cursor moving at all, but so we have this is the water level at Dungog. So we have it sort of peaking around. It was something like sort of 8 to 9 a.m. In the morning. So we had a flood watch issued, and as I said, that would be the second trigger to close the school, as opposed to the East Coast slow warning. Then we have the rain system building and sort of moving over the catchment, and we can see here at basically at midnight, midnight of that event, we had minor to moderate flood warnings in place for the local river systems, including Williams River at Dungog. And during the course of the night, as that rainfall system escalated, we had the flood warnings escalating. So we went from a minor or moderate to major flood warning in the early hours of the morning, about 3 o'clock. Then we had a major.
Is that quick?
That's relatively quick, but we've got 6 hours.
Quick.
Yeah. So the catchment, the Dungog, this Mile Creek catchment that flooded Dungog is about 75 square kilometres. Our Muscle Creek catchment's about 100 square kilometres. So ours is a little bit bigger and will respond a little bit lower, but it gives you an idea of that similar type of response. So in that particular event, we go from, you know, a minor to moderate flood warning at midnight till we had the flood peak at around sort of 9 o'clock, 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning.
What did the damage? The peak or the lead up to the peak?
The lead up to the peak. So the unfortunate part that we had, the people in their houses during the early hours of the morning, and it was the last. And this, I think I reread the coroner's report there as well. So the people actually knew there was sort of floodwater, and some people didn't leave, and then it escalated and escalated and escalated. So there really were series of failures is on the way. But having said that, the warning systems and the early warnings were in place. It's just the actions didn't sort of didn't back that up. But this warning sequence is very much you know, reflective of what we would expect how the Muscle Creek to respond as well. So
just, you know, I'm looking at a 4-day warning. Like, at some point in that 4-day warning is going to be a call to close the school, just for argument's sake, you know.
Yeah, and correct. And remember, these are regional scale events too. It's not as if we just have. We don't just get a rainstorm over the top of our 100 square kilometre catchment and that's it. So yes, so you're right. So that's what we typically see in place. So whether you know, and it's probably it'd be a broader warning across, not just within Muswellbrook, but across the lower Hunter, of course. And then we get that escalation. So then once BOM understand where the rain is likely, where the rainfall predictions are forming, that's when the flood watches get issued, and that would be potentially a broader flood watch for the lower Hunter, and they might specifically look at particular areas as well. So it'll be, you know, whether Muscle Creek gets identified or not, but it'll be certainly a lot of the other sort of local tributaries would be identified. And then
sorry to interrupt, but
no, you're all right.
We've got another 11:30, but I think it's this part of your flood emergency response plan. It's those black and white aspects and finding that balance between not closing the school every second time. You know, there might be, you know, a weather event. It's finding those, because and being clear about the school closures in your flood emergency response plan, and clear about the evacuation is the worst case scenario, but the reality is, you know, you want to be saying near close to 100%. This is what we would be avoiding because we're closed and no one's on site. There's only adults on site, and the adults are old enough to get themselves to evacuation centre. I just think that needs to be broken down. We haven't read it yet.
Sure.
Panel members, I just had another comment. Do you want to take that down? The change in traffic arrangements on site looks like I'm losing a whole heap more trees. So when I just had a quick look at the previous one, and you're undercooked on car parking, I suspect the circulation space wasn't great, but we also look like we're now losing a whole heap more trees. So I just need you to have a look at that. I don't remember at the moment how good the trees are and what they are, but they do provide a vegetated setting. So that's, you're creating, you know, you're trying to fix one problem and then taking out some vegetation. The other thing is, this was an 140 student school, and I've only got 5 classrooms and a science lab. Does that mean you've got kids in, like, are we doing 25 and 30 kids in a class?
With 5 classrooms, yeah, we could definitely do up to 30 in a classroom. It's not our preference. We tend to limit our classes depending on the age. The younger classes are limited to a lower amount, but we actually haven't been at that point to need to determine that. My preference would be about 26 maximum in a classroom, and in the high school, that is. So we'd potentially cap it at that, and that fits in those classrooms for sure.
Right. This doesn't look like, I was just getting a plan, and basically you've got classrooms and a science lab and an admin centre. Is that it?
It's for stage
Correct.
1, I believe. Is that Chris?
That is it. 140 students, and whether we do another DA application, I don't know. If this is the only application we do, we're fine with that.
Right, so it's got
And
all,
just-
all, you can provide all the facilities for year kinder to 12 in 5 classrooms and a science lab and an admin centre.
Well, we don't go to 12 at this point, but we also have an online program, and that might be the way we continue with some of the older students.
Right.
And just on the trees, Alison, they're fairly
Yeah.
low value trees, but through there's a few things. So we'd aim to put the vegetation back, if that makes sense. And we're open to that from a landscaping perspective. We were really responding to Transport for New South Wales and their comments on the traffic and trying to arrive at something that they were comfortable with, and we work closely with council to achieve that solution in discussions on that. So this whole time, both the planning, the flooding and the traffic, we work closely with council to provide these updates.
Yeah, I understand that, but then we create another problem. So I think you just have to, as said, need to look at those trees, see what they are, and see whether it's said. I'm saying that just generally because I just had a quick look, and I wasn't losing the frontage, and now I am. Tony.
Thanks, Alison. Look, there was a previous application for a bigger school here. I know the application was withdrawn, so it's never happened, technically or legally. But my question being, given an absence of constraints, what would you grow this school to? Or what do you think you would need to plan to grow it to? The background of that question is the fact that, you know, comes back to these constraints of flooding. If it was a small school, you might think you can get out easily. If you think you might grow it bigger, or you would be asking to grow it bigger, how big do you think it could grow to? And obviously that might change the thinking about how easy it is to evacuate in an emergency situation. So, loaded question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Can I respond to that, Richard?
Crispy. I was just going to say, Amy, can we just keep to the application that we've made and to the planning merit of the application? Because
we know what's been applied for. As I said, that's you've applied for something, and that's what we deal with. Tony was just asking a broader question because and probably it was a history. Historically, you had applied for a larger site, a larger school, but we are dealing with an application as it is. We totally understand that. Chris, did you want to respond to that?
Look, I'm happy to respond. We understand the constraints. Look, we would like to be a much larger school. Ideally, I would like us to be a single stream school, K to 12. Through this process, we've come to realise that if 140 is the total that we can achieve with the constraints that we have, we will live with that. We want to have Christian education in the town of Muswellbrook. We're dedicated to that, to the town. And this is the way we can see it happening. So we can't stay on 30 Sowerby Street at the Presbyterian site forever. It's a very hilly site. The history there, we've been slightly over 100 students. The school was taken on by the Pacific Group back in, I think, 2018. And before that, the school existed there on 30 Sowerby for quite some time, but also as a small primary. So, as I say, we have options for the upper year 11 and 12. If we need to educate them online, we can do that. We've got resources in the group. So for financial reasons, for growth reasons, we'd love to have a single stream school. Our Pacific Valley school is at 330 students. But as I say, if we only have, we've talked about some of the constraints, including the buses needing to be on site. So at this stage, the only thing in my head, honestly, is this application. I can just tell you, honestly, this is the only application that's in my head and the only thing I'm looking for right now.
Thank you.
All right, we're probably going to have to leave it at that because we've got another briefing. We're going to do some minutes from that, but you can see from our questioning as I said, you know, we understand the history of this site, but it's not an easy one for us, and I know it's not easy for you guys as well, because as I said, but we are, you know, we do want to get quite black and white about those processes and procedures that ensure that you don't get the worst case scenario. So maybe just have a think about how you presented that to us, and it always assists, you know, Darren and Richard, in layman's terms. Yeah, as I said, you're dealing with you know, we deal with this stuff quite a lot, but it's also being able to, you know, translate it easily so we're very clear in what we're doing. So I know you deal with the worst case, but I suppose what we're saying, and you know, I heard from Chris, don't let us get to the worst case. So being very clear on what that involves, without, you want the school, you know, if you're going to have a school here, it has to be able to function sensibly as well. So as I said, our hard question is the appropriateness of the site for the school. And then, you know, you're putting a lot of arguments to show us how it can be managed. We're going to be looking at that very seriously. We'll do some minutes from this, and if we've got other questions, we might drag you back in just to kind of keep going with this. Have a look at the trees and the traffic, because you've responded to transport, you've responded to flooding, but then we create other scenarios. So just have a look at that as well. All right, panel, we've got to go because we've got another matter. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your day. Always helpful. As you say, as you can see, us